Somewhere, right now, someone is staying silent, not because they have nothing to say, but because they don't believe their voice matters. Maybe that someone is you. Maybe life, pain, or people made you feel invisible. Like your words carry no weight. But let me tell you something you might have forgotten. Your voice is power. Your voice is legacy. Your voice can shift the atmosphere. And the world doesn't need more silence. It needs you. There's a silent epidemic sweeping across the world, and no, it's not visible. And it doesn't make the headlines. It doesn't scream. It doesn't announce itself. But it is everywhere. It's the epidemic of silence. I'm talking about the thousands, no, millions of people who go to sleep every night with something unspoken in their chest. A truth, a pain, a story, a dream. But they've learned through pain, through rejection, through fear, to keep quiet. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they're convinced no one will listen. Because somewhere along the line, they were taught that their voice doesn't matter. Maybe it was a parent who told them to be quiet when they were just trying to express themselves. Maybe it was a teacher who overlooked their raised hand. Maybe it was a crowd who laughed, a room that fell silent, or a world that told them, "You don't count here." And so, slowly, bit by bit, they began to shrink. Not physically, but emotionally. They started dimming their light, holding back their truth, swallowing their words. And now, they walk through life like ghosts of themselves, seen, maybe, but not heard. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt that way? Like your opinion wasn't welcome? Like your ideas didn't fit in the room? Like speaking up would make you a burden? If you have, let me tell you something with everything I have in me. It's not your fault, but it is your time to rise. Because silence may feel safe, but it's also a thief. And that brings us to the second truth. Silence isn't just the absence of sound. It's the absence of permission. It's the absence of presence. And when you stop using your voice, you don't just quiet a sound. You begin to lose pieces of yourself. Your voice is tied to your identity, your ability to say, "I feel this. I believe this. I stand for this." There's a moment, and maybe you've had it, or maybe it's coming, where you say something out loud that you've been holding in for years. And the room doesn't reject you. The sky doesn't fall. In fact, someone looks at you and says, "Thank you. I needed that." That moment can be quiet. It might happen at 3 a.m. over coffee with a friend, or in the mirror when you finally admit to yourself what you really want. Or maybe in front of a crowd, trembling, your voice shaking. But still, you speak. And in that moment, something shifts. You realize your voice isn't just noise. It's truth. It's healing. It's power. See, most people aren't afraid of speaking. They're afraid of being dismissed. They're afraid that if they show who they really are, people will walk away. But what if I told you the opposite is true? What if your realness is the very thing someone's been waiting for? What if your story, not the polished version, but the raw, cracked, beautiful truth, is someone else's map out of the dark? Because here's the truth. When you start valuing your voice, you stop needing others to validate it. It's not arrogance. It's alignment. You're no longer begging the world to approve your sound. You're learning to respect your own frequency. And in that space, something incredible happens. You start showing up, not as a version of who you think they want, but as you, fully, boldly, without apology. Now, here's where many people get stuck. They think, but I'm not loud. I'm not the type who commands a room. I'm soft-spoken. Who would even notice me? And that leads us right into the next truth. You don't have to be loud to be hard. We've been sold this myth that only the boldest, the loudest, the most charismatic people are the ones who make a difference. But let me remind you, whispers can start revolutions. Still water runs deep. The loudest person in the room isn't always the wisest. Sometimes it's the one sitting in the corner, observing, holding deep wells of wisdom, who speaks just one sentence that shifts the entire direction of the conversation. Your volume has nothing to do with your value. You don't have to raise your voice to raise your impact. You don't have to scream to be strong. Sometimes a quiet truth is more powerful than 1,000 empty shouts. Think of a mother calming her child with a whisper, a poet whose written words move hearts across generations, a teacher who doesn't yell, but changes lives through compassion and clarity. That's voice. That's impact. You were never asked to be someone else. You were asked to show up as you. And maybe your version of power isn't on a stage. Maybe it's in the way you speak kindness into someone's storm. Maybe your voice is an anchor in chaos. The world doesn't just need volume. It needs authenticity. It needs presence. It needs you. Because at the end of the day, your voice doesn't have to be loud to be a lifeline. So speak, even if it's soft. Speak, even if it's slow. Because the world is listening, and your voice matters more than you know. There's something sacred about your story. Not the highlight reel. Not the part you rehearse when someone asks how you're doing. I'm talking about the real story. The broken chapters, the nights you didn't think you'd make it, the battles you fought in silence, the losses that almost took your breath, the victories no one saw, the private wins that didn't make it to Instagram. That story. And here's what most people don't realize. That very story, the one you're ashamed of, the one you keep hidden, might be the exact story someone else needs to hear to survive. Because pain is universal. But healing, that comes from connection, from someone saying, I've been where you are, and I came through it. That's why your voice matters. Not to impress, not to perform, but to liberate. There's someone sitting in a room, drowning in silence, thinking, no one else could possibly understand this. And your story could be the hand that pulls them back up. We forget this in the noise of the world. That our scars are bridges, not blemishes. They link us. They remind us we're human. They speak where words often fail. And when you speak from that place, not of polished perfection, but of honest survival, you don't just tell people they're not alone. You prove it. Think about the people you admire most, the ones who moved you. Chances are they weren't perfect. They were real. They shared something raw, a truth that cracked something open in you. And it gave you permission to hope again. To try again. To believe that maybe, just maybe, you're not as broken as you thought. That's the power of your voice. That's why your story matters. Not because it's flawless, but because it's yours. Even when we feel the urge to speak, even when something inside of us says, share this, say this, let this out, we often don't, because we believe lies. Lies that were planted by fear, watered by rejection, and reinforced by silence. Lies like, I'm not qualified. Who am I to speak on this? Who am I to share my thoughts, my experiences? But listen, your pain was your training. Your process is your qualification. You lived it. That's enough. No one will listen. This one is heavy. Maybe you've spoken up before, and it felt like shouting into the void. But remember, silence doesn't mean you're not heard. Sometimes people just don't know how to respond. But someone is always listening, even if they don't show it now. I'll mess it up, you think. What if I say it wrong? What if I stumble? What if they misunderstand? But vulnerability isn't about perfection. It's about courage, and courage is messy. For so many people, silence becomes a shield, a shelter, a quiet space to hide in. Because hiding feels safer than standing out. And it makes sense, doesn't it? Somewhere along the way, you learned to stay quiet to survive. Maybe your voice was mocked when you were young. Maybe every time you spoke up, someone shut you down. Maybe you were made to believe that what you had to say wasn't important. Or worse, that you weren't important. So silence became a comfort zone, a familiar cage. No one can hurt you if you don't speak, right? But here's the truth we don't like to admit. Silence isn't always safe. It's just familiar. There is a cost to not speaking, a weight to holding in your truth. The longer you stay silent, the heavier it becomes to carry everything you should have said, everything you wanted to express, everything you deserved to let out. It builds up in the soul like pressure behind a dam, and one day, it doesn't just break, it explodes. Your silence may protect you from rejection, but it also robs you of connection. It may save you from conflict, but it keeps you from freedom. It may keep others comfortable, but it costs you your peace. Let's be real. Silence has never healed shame. Silence has never cured trauma. Silence has never made someone feel seen. And yet, we stay silent, thinking we're staying safe. But what if the very thing you're hiding is the key to someone else's freedom? What if your voice is there are moments in life when staying silent is no longer neutral? It becomes agreement. Moments when saying nothing allows darkness to grow. Moments when injustice screams and silence sounds like support. Your voice is not just a personal tool. It's a weapon that, when used with truth, with courage, with compassion, can break chains. Can dismantle lies, can disrupt systems built on silence and fear. Think about every major movement in history, from civil rights to women's rights, from education to equality. They all began with a voice, not always a crowd, sometimes just one voice that refused to sit down, refused to shut up, refused to pretend that things were okay when they clearly weren't. When you speak out against injustice, even when your voice shakes, you become a light in someone else's darkness. You become the fire starter, the chain breaker, The mirror that forces the world to see what it's been trying to ignore. But injustice doesn't always wear a uniform or carry a sign. Sometimes injustice hides in the classroom, where a child is labeled difficult because they learn differently. Sometimes it's at the dinner table, where someone's dreams are dismissed because they don't fit the mold. Sometimes it's in a relationship where silence is used to control, and speaking up feels like rebellion. In every one of those spaces, your voice is power. You don't have to be a politician to make change. You don't need a platform to take a stand. All you need is to refuse to let wrong go unchecked. All you need is to speak when it's easier to be quiet, because change never begins in comfort. It begins in discomfort. In moments where the truth burns on your tongue, and you let it out anyway. When you use your voice for justice, not just your own, but others, you amplify every unheard cry. You give language to the voiceless. You become the echo of all those who were silenced. And you may not always be liked. You may not always be celebrated, but you will be remembered. And more importantly, you will be free. Now let's talk about something deeper, something that lives inside you, even when you're not aware of it. You weren't born to just blend. You weren't born to simply go along to get along. You were born to shift atmospheres. When you walk into a room, your presence carries something, an energy. A truth, a weight that was never meant to be muted. But the world teaches us early: tone it down, fit in. Don't make people uncomfortable. Don't ruffle feathers. Don't stand out too much. Just be normal. But you weren't built for normal. You were built for impact. And impact never comes from imitation. There's a difference between adapting and disappearing. Too many people adapt so much to their surroundings that they lose themselves entirely. You were not sent here to echo someone else's sound. You were sent here to resonate your own. You were born to be the one who shifts the energy in the room, not by force, not by domination, but by authenticity. Your truth, your light, your story, your presence. That's your power. Have you ever walked into a space and felt something shift when someone spoke? Not because they were loud, not because they were famous, but because what they said was real. That's what you're meant to do. Your voice doesn't just say things, it moves things. It moves fear out of its seat. It moves hearts into healing. It moves conversations forward. It moves people from comfort to action. But to shift an atmosphere, you first have to stop silencing yourself to protect it. You don't need to blend in. You need to wake the room up. Wake the people up. Wake the truth up. You're not here to play small. You're here to stir something. To shake something. To become something that makes others realize they can be more too. And it all starts with your voice.